One left. Yep, we're on the last one, 832. Another CEQA exemption for building code provisions regarding plumbing for recycled water.
Correct. The Building Standards Commission and the Housing and Community Development are currently studying changes to the building codes to allow for dual plumbing and use of recycled water. And so this would provide a CEQA exemption from the adoption of those changes to the Building Standards Code.
Questions? Mr. Obernolte?
I just want to follow up on something, a concern that the chair had on a previous item. When we start talking about dual plumbing, I noticed you were careful not to say a requirement for dual plumbing, but the staff report says requirement. And although I have no problem with the CEQA exemption, I do have a big problem with the requirement for dual plumbing, and it has to do with the affordability of housing in California. I mean, we know adjusted for housing affordability, we have the worst rate of poverty in this state in the entire country. And putting further requirements on new construction is not going to help that. In fact, it's going to make it worse. And I really question, given the direction our water management technology is going, I question the utility of dual plumbing, you know, in comparison with the the disproportionate effect it's going to have on the affordability of housing. So I apologize, there isn't really a question built onto this, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of defend that, why you think that this requirement kind of trumps the competing interest in keeping housing affordable.
I appreciate the member's concern about housing affordability. One reaction I would have is that this is, again, limited to the application of CEQA to that building standards update. The Administrative Procedures Act would still apply, and so the Commission would still go through a public process in adopting any updates.
All right. So if we are not intending to require dual plumbing, why exempt it from CEQA?
As Chair Bloom indicated, sometimes CEQA has been used in a way that would end up, the effect of it would be to delay rollout. And so we're looking into ways to expedite measures that would save as much water as possible. And this is one of those.
Okay. Well, I've registered my concern. As I said, I have no problem with accelerating the process for builders who choose to incorporate dual plumbing in their houses, but I'm concerned that it could be used as a tool to require dual plumbing, and I have a much bigger concern with that. But thank you.
Mr. Gordon.
I'm a little confused. Are we moving forward with a requirement for dual plumbing?
I would have to defer to, I don't know if they're still here, the members of the Building Standards Commission.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Jim McGowan. I'm the Executive Director for the California Building Standards Commission. At this time, we're not moving forward with mandatory standards for recycled water piping. Assembly Bill 2282, chaptered last session, does require HCD and the Building Standards Commission to conduct research with specific stakeholders, including but not limited to, as the bill says, for the purpose of the possibility of developing mandatory building standards. So where we're at with that at this point is both HCD and BSC have budget change proposals pending for the purpose of adding staff in order to conduct that research, but also to fund a CEQA. It's essentially a split between HCD and BSC. There's no reason for us to each do a CEQA when we can jointly do it together and save significant amount of money that way. That CEQA, we estimate, is going to cost a little over $500,000, and we pulled that number from a previous CEQA that was done for a plumbing product called cross-linked polyethylene, or PEX, and that material was added into the Building Standards Code, essentially the plumbing code for California, a number of years ago. But at this juncture, we don't have anything that's coming before the Commission that would mandate the usage of recycled water piping.
Sounds like somebody's anticipating that it will come before you.
So if we were to adopt this trailer bill language, you would not spend the money on the CEQA process. You'd be exempt from that as you explore the possibility of some requirement around dual plumbing.
I think you're correct, yes.
And again, because we're talking about something that you're seeking now funding for staff to start a process, I expect that looking at these standards and considering whether or not to have a requirement is something that will take a period of time. How does this fit within an emergency drought response?
Well, from our perspective, what the bill does is it mandates that we do this within the next intervening code adoption cycle. That cycle is slated to start in December of 2016. If they go forward and the Commission does approve those building standards, they would become effective July 1, 2018. Which is pretty far out for the purposes of seeing any type of water savings mitigation with respect to recycled water piping. It could still be done as an emergency, as I mentioned earlier. If the Building Standards Commission and the Department of Housing came forward with emergency building standards for recycled water piping, the Commission would need to meet within a 30-day period on that and make a decision as to whether or not to approve, disapprove, and take appropriate action. And then following on the heels of that, if it were approved, we file with the Secretary of State and those building standards become effective immediately. But there's still a certifying rulemaking that does need to be done, which would engage all the necessary stakeholders within that process. So an emergency of this nature is a little bit of a test drive, if you will, of a proposed building standard, because it will be going through a full vetting with our Code Advisory Committee members and the public at large.
Well, while I've got you up here, let me ask you a question about a topic that's related to all this, but is not proposed by the administration. Where are we on gray water systems?
Well, gray water currently is a permissive installation. It's within the California Plumbing Code. It's Chapter 16. But it is not mandatory, and at this juncture, I don't know that we have any direction at this point to proceed in an emergency basis to mandate the installation of.
Are there jurisdictions in California that currently allow in their codes installation of gray water systems?
Well, once the code is published and becomes effective, it's applicable to all occupancies throughout the state. So whether the local jurisdiction adopts that code or not is really irrelevant. They get it by state law. Now, they do have the authority to amend those codes, both through the state housing law and through building standards law. For housing, for instance, for state housing law, it requires that the local jurisdiction have a finding that is based upon one of three criteria. It's either topographical, geological, or climatic in nature, their finding. It needs to be reasonably necessary, and they do need to file that filing with the Building Standards Commission in order to make that a lawful ordinance, enforceable ordinance. For the Building Standards Commission, we're going to be dealing mostly with non-residential, and our law reads just a little bit different. While it does require the finding of topographical, geological, or climatic, and it does need to be reasonably necessary, it also needs to be more restrictive. It's a little bit of a nuanced difference between the housing element and the non-residential. So it's kind of a long way to answer your question, but the local jurisdictions have that, and whether they enforce it or allow for it, I can't say. It's because it's not mandatory.
Well, I think it's a pretty big issue, and I confess to not having followed every step of what you just outlined. But this is technology that could be deployed today, and if it were to become more available in the state and local jurisdictions were to understand that it was available, I think there might be a lot of voluntary adoption around the state that could help save water. And there seems to be little or no attention being paid to it as a potential low-cost technology that could be broadly implemented. Maybe there would have been trailer bill language that could have helped move that along. Are there any other questions? We're going to take public comment unless there are additional comments that anyone would like to make to wrap up. Actually, is the gentleman from HCD still here? Oh, okay. That's too bad. Let's take public comment. Yes, over to the side there would be great. Okay. Mr. Loeffner, if you could stay just in case there are needs to respond. And please, I know I kept you till the end and am asking you to make all of your comments on these collectively. Therefore, feel free to take some time to do it. I'm not giving you an unlimited amount of time because we do have a number of people here who want to give their input, but I do know that there are a number of different trailer bills here that cover a lot of ground.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. My name is Bob Reeb with Reeb Government Relation. I represent public water systems and farm water districts up and down the state. I'll go through these very quickly. On number 820, expanded local enforcement authority, we want to make sure that volumetric penalties should be able to be included in the customer's water bills as we do today, rather than requiring a notice and hearing process. There's a difference between the volumetric penalties and just some infractions or other penalties that this law would, if passed, allow. 824, drought monitoring reporting. We want you to understand that this bill would result in costs on farm economies throughout the state approaching $100 million. I just heard from one reclamation district in Solano County that has 4 pipelines to divert their water under water rights permits. It's about $22,000 per pipe. So by the time you do CEQA and engineering and purchase and install these, it's in excess of $100,000. These districts are able to, based on engineering, determine the pipe size, how long they operate, and the pump size, how much water they're diverting. So when we see language in here about infeasible, if it's infeasible and reasonably expensive, it's a real challenge for us to go upon faith and support something like this. Number 825, drought water system consolidation. Again, if feasible, and providing systems with adequate and affordable financial assistance as standards that the board would utilize is a bit troubling. We have a Prop 218 concern if it's not a grant. If we have to take a loan to make these consolidations happen, then we're putting the costs of that onto our existing customers, and that does not reflect the constitutional standard of a reasonable cost providing service. If this bill is also going to be considered, we have to include relief or a safe harbor type of agreement for the system that's going to take these people in, because it's going to result in more water being used. And these systems under orders from the state board to reduce water use, some up to 36%. So now if we're forced to consolidate and provide additional water to an area that doesn't have it, we're going to have a real problem, and we are going to be subject to fines from the state boards. That needs to be fixed. 826, the drought submetering bill. Your House policy committees have defeated this bill or held the bill probably 4 or 5 times. The language in this bill comes from the older version of Senator Wolk's SB 750. The language is not included in her current bill, SB 7. This is really not a budget trailer bill. It's going through the legislative process. She has removed provisions of the law, proposed law, that would require water systems to require these submeters, but we have no responsibility in the law for them. Neither can we charge any fees for them, but we have to accept costs. there's no reimbursement authority in the bill. So we'd really recommend this not be taken up and dealt with in SB 7 as it moves now into your House. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take a quick break, and I'm going to ask Mr. Obernolte to keep the meeting going.
Good morning, Chair and members. Brian Augusta on behalf of the Rural Community Assistance Corporation, which provides training, technical assistance, and financial resources in rural communities to address, among other things, water and wastewater. And we are supportive of the administration's various proposals relating to safe drinking water. And I want to particularly talk about the consolidation proposal that's been discussed here today briefly, to say that we've looked at the trailer bill language. We think it provides a good framework for beginning to address the need for consolidation. We look forward to working with the administration on some of the details, and of course with this committee and their counterparts in the other House to expand on that framework. But I want to point out another related issue. I think the governor's, the administration's drought proposal with respect to drinking water does highlight the need and the connection between safe drinking water and the drought. And I wanted to bring up a related issue which isn't yet addressed in the governor's proposal, but we hope will be addressed as the budget moves forward, and that is the related issue of safe drinking water in schools. 25% of California schools do not provide safe, fresh drinking water to their students on a daily basis, even though state and federal law requires it. And that problem is exacerbated by the drought. And we think this is an opportune time, speaking of drought resilience, to begin to address that. There's already work going on. RCAC, Community Water Center, and many other groups are working to address this drinking water deficiency, safe drinking water deficiency in schools. And there's been some private support for installing drinking water stations that can filter the water and provide safe drinking water to students who may not be getting access to safe drinking water at home. And we believe that this drought relief package should be expanded to include some support for expanding those safe drinking water stations and also beginning to map where the problem exists, not just in schools, but in communities that don't have safe access to drinking water. So we're looking for an additional allocation to support that very important need. We could quickly supply safe drinking water to hundreds of thousands of students who don't currently have it with a very small additional expenditure in the state budget. And we would urge that as these proposals move forward, we look at how we can also expand safe drinking water to kids on a daily basis in schools. With those, I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. Wendy Ritterbusch with the Association of California Water Agencies. I think we've worked very cooperatively in earnest with the administration over the last couple of years to help move the water bond, the groundwater package, and most recently Save Our Water education campaign. We're obviously coordinating webinars on drought and the recent emergency regulations on water conservation with the Brown administration as we speak. And we do appreciate that they've reached out to us to try to improve the draft language, but in its current form right now, I would say that we're drought fatigued. And frankly, the sheer number of the budget trailer bills that are being heard today in this committee that contain significant public policy issues is really unprecedented in the resources arena. It's disappointing. In particular, the consolidation language, trailer bill language 825, is troubling to our member agencies. Starting with the title, Drought Water System Consolidated, as currently drafted, it has no real nexus to the drought. It would require consolidation for any water systems, and the circumstances have not been realistically limited or defined. The budget trailer bill draft language is inconsistent with the draft Safe Drinking Water Plan for California that does not adequately address existing barriers to consolidation. According to the State Water Resources Control Board staff update that they provided to board members at a public meeting in March, the Safe Drinking Water Plan being released to the legislature in June 2015 is going to recommend the enactment of legislation requiring consolidation. And it's going to require consolidation where feasible and appropriate, when the system cannot demonstrate technical, managerial, or financial capacity to deliver safe drinking water, when the system is within the sphere or influence of a public water system with adequate TMF capacity and is willing to consolidate, and when legal and financial barriers are addressed. There's no liability protection right now in this legislation, and all you have to do is look at last year's SB 1130 by Senator Roth, for a very good, successful example that provided specific limited liability, immunities from liability. It was a complex, year-long effort. It went through multiple policy committees, EQ, judiciary. I mean, it took a whole year to get this done. And so it's a huge lift. And then the last piece is Prop 218. There's going to be protections needed for consolidating agencies. It's not just the cost to construct and connect initially, it's the operation and maintenance, and those are significant costs. And so they're going to have to be covered by rate revenue, and rate increases necessary to cover the costs of that post-consolidated district are really vulnerable right now to Prop 218 rejection. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. Thank you.
Hi, Danielle Blassett with the California Municipal Utilities Association. We wanted to support Proposal 823 regarding drought penalties. But I wanted to echo my colleagues' comments regarding the consolidation proposal. We think this is a super important issue that needs to be addressed, but we do think it is a public policy issue that it belongs in a longer and more robust process than a budget trailer bill. Some concerns we have is the scope and application of the bill is poorly defined. We know there are communities that are running out of water. We want to see those issues addressed. However, the way the bill, the way the language is written right now, there's several terms in the bill. Whether it's the best means to provide water to the systems, feasible, there's adequate and affordable financial assistance, what is a failure to provide potable water. All of these terms are not defined, and it also, the way the language is written, does not apply strictly to drought situations. It's to all consolidation efforts. So these are our concerns. There's clarifications in the state drinking water plan, as Ms. Ritterbusch outlined, and also in the intended use plan that the State Water Board is prepared for the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund that could help clarify some of these issues. And then also something that I wanted to mention, I know there was some discussion today among the members regarding the consolidating systems maybe not doing the right thing, but there's actually some situations where the system that would be consolidated are refusing to do so. So it creates some situations for a system that does want to do the right thing, but when they go to try and consolidate with a system, they're not able to. And then also the liability protection concern, we also want to make sure that that's fully addressed. So those are my comments. Thank you so much.
Omar Carrillo, Senior Policy Analyst, Community Water Center, also on behalf of Clean Water Action and Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. Specific to the drought water system consolidation, there's 7,500 public water systems in this state. The smallest communities, some of the communities that we work with, have lacked safe drinking water for years, maybe even a decade. Now you also have the issue with the drought. So the same communities that have lost their safe drinking water, have not had safe drinking water for many years, also now are running out of water. There needs to be an aggressive, streamlined approach to addressing the issue of communities that want to work with other communities that ultimately can consolidate and create the economies of scale that's necessary to have the TMF, to have the ability to provide safe drinking water, and ultimately address this very serious issue. So we are definitely in strong support of the consolidation effort proposed here. In addition to, separate from that, the drought metering, something that was mentioned earlier is, you can't manage what you can't measure, you can't meter, right? So we need to really know how much water is being used. Now, we're not necessarily, it's a very robust piece. I mean, read 826, it's very robust. There's a lot of things that probably have to be addressed and fixed there, specifically at the impacts on low-income communities and elderly who have an inability to pay and maybe already pay their water bill through their rent. So ultimately, however that gets addressed, that needs to be addressed. And lastly, similar to my colleague Brian Augusta, who mentioned something regarding really quantifying and knowing who lacks the human right to water, who lacks safe drinking water in California, and also the impact on school children who drink contaminated water on a daily basis. We need to be able to address that. That's not addressed here, but that's something that we're going to continue to talk to committee staff about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dan Jacobson with Environment California. I'll go quickly since most of my points have already been made, but I just wanted to emphasize support for 824, drought monitoring and reporting, critical. Consolidation, Omar has said it incredibly well, so I won't go through there, but I think that'll be important. Drought submetering, for what's been said, we need to make sure that we're not only metering it, but making sure that we're protecting the interests of the low-income communities. Thank you for your support.
Debbie Orrs with Community Water Center, and also on behalf of Clean Water Action. We want to just state our strong support for 824 drought monitoring reporting, especially in the face of drought. We need consistent regulations across the board for monitoring and reporting. And furthermore, we need accurate and timely data in order to fully understand what the drought has caused. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Richard Harris on behalf of the Water Reuse Association. I think what we want to do is put our comments into the context of what is really an emergency here. That's exactly what the drought is. And because of that, then we're willing to go down this road of the CEQA exemptions. We think that this is very important and appreciate the governor's leadership in putting this into there within the context of the emergency. Because when you think about it, the only new water that we're going to get is whether or not it rains or we can do more recycling. It's the only way to put new water into the system. So we've got to look at this as what it is. It is this critical emergency situation. So what do we need to do? We need to streamline that the best way we possibly can. We support the governor's May revise of putting more money out as he did to increase the amount of money out of Proposition 1, because our member agencies are working very, very hard to get their projects as far along as possible to be able to get them built, to be able to take care of that, to be able to take advantage of that state assistance. So we think that we've got we're moving as fast as we can there, and this would be one extra piece to do it. I want to bring up the point that it's probably going to be the smaller sorts of projects that take advantage of these CEQA exemptions, especially the right-of-way ones, these kind of purple pipe projects. It will be those, but they can be significant in some in the locale where they are, where you're going to then put non-potable water and then take the potable water and use that for your drinking water purposes. And they will be the ones that will use that, because the larger projects will probably be using federal dollars, loan money that include federal dollars, so they probably won't be able to take advantage of that exemption necessarily. But all of these projects still undergo an incredible amount of review because of the permitting process that the State Water Board referenced earlier. So I think that given where we are today, I think we need to do this. We've had this discussion in policy committees the past few years of these sorts of exemptions, and we think that now the time is such that we should adopt it and try to get some new water into the system. Thank you.
Hi, Pilar Oñate-Quintana here for the East Valley Water District, and we're reviewing the totality of the trailer bills being offered, but we did not want to miss the opportunity to strongly support the CEQA drought relief, particularly with respect to recycled water, because that's going to be critical to our area. And Richard Harris said it beautifully, so I won't belabor the point, but thank you for the opportunity to urge our support.
Good morning. Kathy Cole with the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. I want to address three of the trailer bills. 824 first, which is the use reporting proposal. Certainly this drought has heightened the awareness of illegal and legal diversions in the state's water system. But I would also argue that it's important for the long-term water management of the system. We really need to get a handle on how much water is being diverted and when, particularly when we're trying to assess impacts to native fisheries and legal users of water downstream. So I urge your support for Trailer Bill 824 to close those loopholes and to hopefully you'll look favorably on that proposal. 831, as my colleagues have said, the recycled water CEQA bill, we would support that. It's a good way of moving new water projects to reality, and also echo some of the concerns about the lack of language in the consolidation bill with respect to liability. Thank you very much.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Chair, members. Glenn Farrell with the San Diego County Water Authority. My comments are related to Provision 831. It's the CEQA provision for drought mitigation. As you know, we're in the midst of an intensive effort to really try to meet very strict mandatory water use restrictions that were approved by the State Water Resources Control Board. And as local agencies really try to work hard to reduce that denominator and even exceed those targets to the greatest extent possible, it's really time, as Richard Harris, my colleague, just said, to start focusing on the numerator as well. We're in the midst of a prolonged drought. We don't know to what extent this drought continues, but it's time to start focusing on regional self-sufficiency, to reducing reliance on the Delta, to insulating these communities from future drought. And that's why we're supportive of the direction that the administration has put forward in this proposed trailer bill 831. San Diego County has at least 10 municipalities and water agencies that are right now actively exploring advanced recycled water treatment in the form of indirect and direct potable reuse. That is really the next significant increment of water supply in San Diego County. And the City of San Diego is looking at a project of 96,000 acre-feet a year. Padre Dam Municipal Water District is looking at a 3,000 acre-foot a year project. So these are significant new projects bringing significant new water supplies into the region. It's been a misnomer for a while that there is no new water supplies. The new water supplies are available. It's the Pacific Ocean through desalination, and it's advanced treatment of recycled water to bring it to drinking water quality standards. We have some concerns with the language in the bill that we would obviously be interested in addressing in the context of potable reuse. We don't think that the language adequately covers the components of a potable reuse project, including injection wells for supply augmentation, and discharge of advanced treated water to a reservoir where it meets the basin plan objectives. Those are issues that obviously we'd be interested in working on, but we're supportive of the direction. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, members, good afternoon. Robert Gore from the Gualco Group on behalf of Imperial Irrigation District, Kings River, and Kern County. First of all, on behalf of fee payers, we'd like to thank the Water Board for noting in 823 that it will decrease the demand on fee payers. We appreciate that commitment. On 825, also the testimony indicated that many small districts have a negative value. I think that's worth remembering as we perhaps increase the demand on fee payers. Overall, we'd like to associate ourselves with the comments of Mr. Reed and Ms. Ritterbusch and commend the administration for trying to manage this crisis. It's immense and innumerable, as we know. Lastly, virtually all members of the committee noted that there's been much imprecision and many assumptions made. There may be a way to address this with urgency bills as opposed to a trailer bill language. Thank you.
Kim Lewis representing Nexus E-Water, and I would just register our support for Trailer Bill 832 around AB 2282 implementation and trying to expedite this in the time of the drought, and would thank the chair for his comments around gray water recycling and the need for locals to really improve and impress upon their adoption locally, and that Assemblymember Gatto also has a bill, AB 1463, that's also moving through this year that has to deal with standards for local adoption as well. Thank you.
Mr. Chair and members, Jenna Price on behalf of the California League of Conservation Voters. We want to thank you and the staff for all the work that you've done on this. I will be brief. Very quickly, we are in support of, and I'll just rattle down the numbers, 813, making well logs public. Also 820 and 823, drought penalties and enforcement. We think that these absolutely need to happen in times of drought. And 824, monitoring of water diversions and reporting. I also want to add on, I believe, 826, submetering. We think that's a great proposal. The not so good, we have a few issues with 831 specifically, especially Part E, which is the CEQA waiver for any drought action by the governor. And there are some concerns around C and D, which are exempting new stormwater and recycled water projects. I'll keep it brief, and that's it. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I neglected to ask Mr. Brown if he had any comments.
Brian Brown, LAO. No, we don't have any formal position on the proposal at this point, given the short time frame we've had to review, and we'll continue to work with your staff and be as helpful as we can.
Thank you. My apologies for not getting to you earlier. And are there any other questions that Mr. Almy or anyone else would like to add at this time? All right. We will be back here tomorrow to do more work in furtherance of the closing out the budget this week. So thank you all for your participation. We are adjourned.
Thank you.